Thank you so much. Well, thank you again for having me, and to the Fortune Greece Network for having me on here. I'm very excited to talk about my favorite topic, which is well-being. As Desi mentioned, as a my kind of journey with well-being started as a kid when I had cancer, and that was, I think, that's a big part of my story and why well-being is so near and dear to my heart. But I have been particularly interested in the intersection between well-being and workplaces, because I believe, and I think we all know now, especially with the pandemic, that workplaces are a major contributor to people's livelihood. And so having well-being be a part of workplaces, and a crucial or a core part of workplaces and the culture of workplaces is just something that I'm extremely passionate about. So today I'll be talking about well-being as the new performance metric. So in the past, it's been a little bit more of something that has taken a back seat in organizations. And, the intention of my presentation is to have you really look at it as, the new and potentially the most important performance metric of your organization. And I'll explain why. So just a quick overview of what I'll cover here. First, I do want to take a little bit of time to define well-being. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. It means a lot of different things to different people. As Desi mentioned, I have a background. I was originally a management consultant at Gallup, and Gallup has some of the best sciences and research around well-being. So the way that I define it will come from that research, which I think is important because it helps provide a little bit more of a foundational definition of what well-being is. And then I'll talk about why well-being equals performance. That if you have employees with high well-being, why does that mean high performance? I want you to look at those two as synonymous. Then I'll talk a little bit about the business case for well-being, some of the statistics that support why well-being is so important. And then I'll walk you through some best practices, some organizations that are prioritizing well-being, and then the actions that you can take to start developing a well-being strategy. So first, I just want to start with a shift in perspective, because I think when people hear the term well-being, especially in the context of organizations, you might first think of it as something that is, just the soft stuff, or it's, well-being or well-being programs are nice to have, but they're not necessarily a priority. You also might just think of it as a program or a perk or a benefit. You might just think of like gym memberships or yoga classes. I know that has been the case here in the States. But I want you to kind of change your thinking now to thinking of it more as an actual a leadership mindset. And when what I mean by that is when you're the kind of leader that thinks to yourself, okay, well-being is one of the most important things to focus on for our employees. And that if I'm going to be a good leader and a mindful leader, that truly caring about the well-being of my people is of utmost priority. I also want you to think of it as a culture strategy, not just as a program. So usually we hear well-being program, and I don't think we hear enough of it being called a well-being strategy. A real well-being strategy is infiltrated into the culture, and I'll get more into that as we go along here. Also want you to think of it as absolutely crucial to your business, not just a nice to have, but a need to have. And also think of it as your key performance metric. And as Desi mentioned, I will touch on, how do you go about measuring this properly? And I'll get to that at the end of the presentation. So first of all, just defining well-being. When we hear well-being, a lot of other terms get kind of thrown into this category. Mindfulness is part of well-being, happiness is part of well-being, health and fitness is part of well-being, and so is wellness and mental health. So you might wonder, what's the difference between all of these? So the difference is when we talk about well-being, it really has to do with the overall quality of life of your employees. All of these other terms are really parts of well-being. So mindfulness is more of a practice. You see the person meditating up there in the corner. So it's more of a practice of meditation and a way of thinking. Wellness has to do more so with the physical, more so with physical health. It's usually used in that context that kind of ties with the health and fitness category. Happiness is also sometimes used interchangeably with well-being. There's world happiness reports out there in the world now. The reason why we don't use the word, or I don't use the word happiness, is because happiness is a emotion, and it's a fleeting emotion. Nobody lives in a state of happiness all the time. However, being happy and having that emotion be part of your life is important to your overall well-being. Now, mental health is in its own category. I know that in the States, mental health is normally associated here with actually mental ill health. It usually, when it's used here, at least, we're more so talking about anxiety and depression, and how do we deal with that, and how do we improve people's mental health. So when I talk about well-being, I'm talking about how do you create thriving employees in all different areas of their life. And thriving employees usually, require a whole combination of these different terms that you see on the screen. So well-being, kind of as I define it, and that really comes from the Gallup research, is to be thriving in the core areas of life, which therefore equates to having a quality life. Now, I want to quickly show you this framework. There's going to be a lot on the screen. This is my framework, that I use with organizations, but I'm going to touch more so on the middle circle here, because when it comes to workplace well-being, there's a lot of factors at play. So in the middle, you have employee well-being and the things that impact just the individual and what's more so in their control to influence. On the outside of employee well-being, and I don't know if you can't see my cursor, but where you see conscious leadership, management, development, and all of that around it, those are what I call the company drivers of well-being. Because in your organization, there are elements of your culture that are affecting employee well-being. That's different than what's going on in just the employee's world. So if you see in the blue circle, an employee, the core areas of life that are affecting an employee are their work, their relationships, their finances, their health, and their community. I'm not going to go into each one of those 5 for the sake of time, but if you want to check out some of the research on these areas and why they're important, there's a book which I highly recommend that Gallup published called Wellbeing, the 5 Essential Elements. And what's interesting about those 5 areas, I call them the areas of life, is that work, according to research, is the most important element of your life in terms of what is influencing your well-being. And the reason why work is the most important for your well-being is because your work gives you a sense of your identity. It's where you make your money to feed you and your family. It's the place where you have an opportunity to learn and grow as a human being. A lot of our social networks are tied to our work. And it's also where we spend the majority of our time. So getting that, really focusing on work and workplaces as a way to improve well-being that's one of the reasons why it's so important. But so as you see, employee well-being has to do with those 5 categories. And in the middle, we have being of a person, which is a mind, body, and spirit. So you can think of the inner circle, that mind, body, and spirit, as the well-being, and I call the five elements around it as living. So those are the things that are influencing employee well-being. So now I want you to think of having thriving employees as people who are the CEOs of their lives. So a thriving employee is not just a well employee, it's not just a healthy employee or a fit employee. A thriving employee really is a empowered employee. And when an employee is empowered, they contribute all kinds of things to your business. And this is where, why well-being is really synonymous with performance. So when employees are truly well, and again, when I say well, I mean in all those different areas of life that I just showed you, when they are truly well, they're mentally focused and they do thoughtful, thorough, and impressive work. They're innovative and they're business builders. When I say business builders, I mean, when you have innovative employees, they come up with new business lines. They actually are literally growing your organization because they are the employees that are coming up with those ideas that then fuel your business and create more clients and create more ideas for growth. They also help build a positive work environment. These are the people that come to work energized with, a positive demeanor, a good overall vibe, as they say, and that contributes to, the work environment. It makes the people around them happier. It has a contagious effect. These people also speak proudly of the organization, which is extremely important, both internally and externally when they're not in the workplace. They get more done in less time. They solve client and customer problems. And they're more resilient in challenging times. So going back to my last slide, if you think of these people as the CEOs of their lives, they are taking care, they're doing well mentally, physically, they're taking care of the different areas of their life. They feel good about life overall. And then therefore, when challenging times hit, whether it's pandemic or something else, these are the people that can get through it, and they actually help other people in your organization get through it. Now, one thing I want to mention about this is that there's a certain amount of well-being that is in the employee's hands. What I mean is that some people are just wired to take care of themselves on their own. But then there's a whole host of things that the organization can do to further create more people that fall in this category. There's a lot that an organization can do to improve well-being, to ensure you have more employees like this. Now I want to talk a bit about the business case for well-being. So everything I just mentioned has supportive research behind it, all those points that I just mentioned, but I'm going to go through some of them here. So first of all, I want to mention that right now, especially with the pandemic, we all have heard of the Great Resignation. I believe, I know that's a huge issue that's going on in the States here is companies can't seem to keep their talent. And a huge reason for that is because people are putting their foot down when it comes to well-being and their sense of work-life balance. So this is according to a study done by Gallup. And what it says is that employees of all generations rank the organization cares about employees' well-being in their top 3 criteria in terms of what they are looking for in a workplace. And for millennials and Generation Z, this is their number 1 workplace desire. So some people think, it's just a millennial thing to be, to want a good work-life balance in their organization, but it's not. Employees across the board are really seeking this. So now what happens when well-being is a priority versus when it's not. Okay. So these statistics I'm going to show you kind of what the upside is of focusing on well-being in your organization and what the downside is if you don't. All right. I'm going to actually start with the downside. So employees who have low well-being, or they might even be as far to say, that they are burned out, which is kind of the, complete opposite of having high well-being. Employees who are burned out are 63% more likely to take a sick day, 2.6 times more likely. That's supposed to say more likely to be actively seeking a different job, right? Because if they're sitting at their desk, burnt out all day, they're not happy and they can't take it anymore. So they are actively looking for another job. They're 13% less confident in their performance. And this one, ties to mental health, anxiety and depression and those types of feelings, because when people are burnt out, they start to, just get hard, feel down on themselves and don't feel as confident in their work, anymore, because they are just, they're burning the candle at both ends, so to speak. This is a really crazy study. There's a poll of almost 3,000 people that reported that nearly half of employees had reported missing time at work from work-related stress. 61% said that the workplace stress made them physically sick, and 7% said that they had been hospitalized because of workplace stress and its physiological effects. This is happening all over the world, by the way. I know I'm talking to Greece right now, but I have done a lot of research on this and what's happening around the world. And workplace stress is quite literally killing people. I know that sounds extreme, but there are people who are having heart attacks, have a lot of anxiety, or taking medication in order to deal with that anxiety. And they're not necessarily talking about it. If they end up in the hospital or they are physically sick, they might just say that they're sick, but they're not necessarily telling you that it's because they are so stressed out or they are burned out at work. So I put the statistic on there because I want to make sure that people and organizations like you really take this matter to heart and realize how important it is to take care of your employees. Now, on the flip side, employees with both high engagement, when they're engaged in their work, they enjoy their work, and they have high well-being, are 59% less likely to look for a job within a different organization in the next 12 months. They're 30% more likely not to miss any work days due to poor health in any given month. They're 27% more likely to report excellent performance in their own job at work, so they feel good about their work. 45% more likely to report high levels of adaptability in the presence of change. So that speaks what I mentioned before about resilience. These people, they can bounce back. They can deal with change, and that's such an important quality to have, as we know, especially during today's world. Now, I do just want to put this quote up on the screen here, because what I don't want is for organizations to always think they need a business case in order to focus on well-being. This is a fabulous book called Dying for a Paycheck, which paints a picture of why well-being is so important. But Jeffrey Pfeffer, the author, states in the book that if we believe in the fundamental sanctity of human life, we have a moral and ethical responsibility to improve the well-being of employees in our workplaces. And I say that because I know that this talk I'm giving is inside of, I believe, the mindful teams category. And if you're a mindful leader, as much as it's important to have the business case, it's also important to just be focusing on this because it's the right thing to do. So here's a few organizations that I would say are doing well-being right. These organizations I selected because they're not just putting in place some kind of well-being program or some basic perks, or have, a nice policy or benefits policies and, benefits and good policies in place. But these are companies that are really making well-being part of the culture. Panera Bread is a major chain here in the U.S. They have 120,000 employees. They're actually a client of mine, and they are truly committed to having well-being be a part of the culture and measuring it properly. So it's a long journey ahead. They're committed to long-term strategy. But that kind of mentality is what I consider to be doing it right. Same thing with Zappos. Zappos is really well known for focusing on well-being and measuring it. Southwest has always been known for doing right by their people, even during some of the major recessions. Southwest is the airline. I think they might only, I'm not sure if they're international, but they have always prioritized their people and avoid layoffs whenever they can. LinkedIn is also a place that's been very thoughtful in their approach to well-being. Intuit, and then REI, which is an outdoor brand. REI and I would say Patagonia too fall into this category. But a lot of these organizations, what they have in common is that the leaders at the highest level of the organization were committed to well-being. It wasn't just something that was given to HR. It wasn't just a program. It was something that they want to make sure that leaders understood, and that well-being is part of the culture. So now, how to begin a well-being strategy? I'm just going to walk through some of the long-term and short-term actions you can take. So on the long-term side, one of the best things you can do is start to create a new role called the Chief Wellbeing Officer. Actually, part of the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative that I lead, we are putting out a new template for a job description. So if anyone's interested in that, I can share that just to help organizations know what that job position should sound like. Also long term, this requires actually having some kind of budget in place over time to ensure that you can really dedicate resources to developing the strategy. Training managers is a crucial part of a well-being strategy because managers are really the glue to making sure that people are doing okay. Managers have their finger on the pulse of their employees, or they should. And so making sure that managers understand, how can they engage their employees, or how can they properly check in with their employees is really important. So having a substantial training program in place for managers that incorporates well-being is really important. Also, leadership education around this. So, it's important that the leaders of the organization are understanding the different drivers of well-being, kind of like what I had on the screen earlier with the framework of understanding how all of the cultural drivers impact well-being. So, continuous leadership involvement and a thorough education plan is important, and employee programming really falls into its own category. So having resources and specific programming just for employees to take advantage of is also important. Now, short term, the first thing, I always say is, don't just ask HR to start focusing on this. You really have to hire an expert. And I say that because, a lot of organizations will just try to pass this on to HR. And if you do that, first of all, HR already has enough to do, most likely. And they aren't necessarily, some people are, but they aren't necessarily experts in the world of culture, engagement, well-being. Now, I'm not just saying that because, I am an expert that you can hire. I'm saying that because it's important that you get somebody who can hold you to account, who can truly walk you through how to do this properly. Also, in the short term, practicing it as a leader is so important. So when I say that, what I mean is that whether you're the CEO or you're the leader of a team, making sure that you're prioritizing your own well-being, making sure you're taking care of your health, that you're taking care of your family, that you're making time for the things that are important in your life, and you're showing your team or you're showing your organization that you're doing that, is one of the easiest, most, and fastest ways to start improving well-being. Because when you do that as a leader or as a manager, it automatically starts to have an effect on your people. This has actually been proven by research that managers with higher well-being and higher engagement automatically have teams with higher engagement and well-being. And especially if you're a CEO or a senior level leader, by you being somebody who shows that you prioritize yourself, your health, your family, it helps your people feel that they have permission to do the same thing. And when you do that, you're recharging yourself. You're giving yourself the energy that you need from sleeping well, from eating well, to be focused, to be productive at work. So practicing it as a leader is probably one of the easiest things that you can do to start making an impact on your organization. Another short-term action you can take is to create an internal committee of well-being champions. So if you're somebody who, this topic resonates with you, don't do it alone. Within your organization, first find other members of, maybe on the senior leadership team or really anywhere in the organization. But if you reach out and say, hey, I'm putting together a well-being committee, I want to start focusing on this as an organization, just start finding those people who are passionate about this topic. And just creating that dialogue and bringing these people together will help you start to build momentum around it. And on that note, then one of the other important things is to build a customized business case to create internal buy-in. So say once you have this committee together, building a business case for why well-being is so important and sharing that amongst the people who need to hear it within the organization is one of the first steps you need to take. This is actually something, one of the first things that I do, like with the clients that I work with. I help them create a business case, but I call it a customized business case because it's important that they build the business case in a way that makes sense for the organization and show the organization that, so say you're, you are a company like Panera. Why is it that well-being is going to, help improve the overall culture of Panera? Why is it going to be good for the business of Panera? And then you create internal buy-in, whether that means getting your CEO on board with this concept or other, fellow colleagues. And last but not least, this is where the measurement comes in. Conducting a well-being audit, I call it. So doing some type of qualitative or quantitative analysis is so important. So qualitative means actually interviewing people in your organization at all different levels, people that represent different parts of the organization, different departments, will give you a thorough understanding of what people are dealing with. This is something that I do a lot of times on behalf of companies, and I have these conversations to start to uncover some of the themes and what people are actually saying. That's the qualitative part. The quantitative part is measuring well-being properly. Now, I'm just going to take a second to go, to talk about this because this is what, the title of this presentation is a new performance metric. Measuring it properly is so important. If you don't measure it, it sends a message that this isn't really that important. It's just something that maybe we're entertaining, but we're not really committed to it. As soon as you measure it, it shows that you're truly committed to it. Measuring it means that, as part of your annual survey, that your survey needs to incorporate really well done engagement and well-being metrics. And you need to be asking the right questions as part of that survey. And when I say survey, I don't just mean, asking a lot of, a lot of questions and gathering a lot of information. It really is about measuring the right things. So there's a handful of vendors that I usually recommend to my clients that are doing this really well. Selecting the right one kind of depends on your organization, but I have a Gallup background. Gallup does a really good job at measuring employee engagement and well-being. So they are one organization that I recommend a lot. Another one is Culture Amp. There's a newer organization that does a really robust measurement of well-being called peopleful.io. But there's a whole handful of them, which I'd be happy to share that information at any time. But doing your due diligence and really searching for the right survey partner that can give you like a well-being score, so that every year you can look and you could say, how have we moved the needle on employee engagement and well-being, and you can truly be tracking that over time and staying consistent about it. Again, we live during a time now where well-being has finally become important to the world. And so these types of measurements and tools are popping up all over the place now. So this is way more possible than it has ever been before. And then, I have this up there. I do have a basic workplace well-being readiness assessment, which is a 10-question quiz to just give you an idea if your organization is ready to start implementing something. So I believe I have a link in my profile for that. And that's it, Desi. So would be happy to discuss further any questions that you have, but thank you, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Danielle. No, it was extremely helpful. And allow me as an economist, always when we talk about those numbers, it's nice to be able to measure. Because lately we have talked about the ESGs and how we measure well-being as part of it. And what we see also in Greece, we're trying to stop talking the talk and go from talking the talk to walking the walk. Yes. So when you are able to measure, when you are able to take all these tests and steps and see what's happening, then you're also better able to take more proper actions, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So my first question, we have several questions here for you, is what are, in your opinion, some of the mistakes that organizations do when they try to create a well-being program?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of them is along the lines of what I mentioned before, when they, just kind of push this towards HR as being and that's another thing that HR should do, because it really can't be just an additional item, on somebody's list. It needs to be an entire area of focus. So that is, I would say, hands down, the biggest mistake that people make. And when you're looking for, say, a role or somebody to be accountable for this. So on that note, what I'll say, another mistake is just not having anybody really own it and really be accountable for this. And then what tends to happen is you might be seeking somebody who has an HR background, but you really need to find people who have some type of experience in driving culture and employee engagement, or even leadership development. So that I would say is one of the mistakes. Another mistake is just not measuring it, just making it, not having having something in place to just make sure that you're doing this over time. And another mistake is just treating it like a program. I think one of the things that drives employees crazy, is that if an organization tries to give them some type of perk or benefit, in the States, yoga has been something that a lot of organizations try to offer now. But employees will roll their eyes at that if they feel that they are just being given some kind of basic perk, but they know that the leadership is really not supporting it, or that the leadership, or that if burnout exists within the organization and the company is not doing anything to get rid of that burnout or to reduce people's workloads, then they roll their eyes at programs like, like a yoga program or gym memberships or whatever it is. So it's really important that you don't just give employees some kind of quick fix without having, a real commitment to well-being at the highest of levels.
You talked about burnout also during your presentation, and I was always also very curious, how can you realize that an employee is about to get a burnout and how you can prevent it once you realize it? And the second question has to do with the self. How can I realize that I'm getting a burnout and what can I do?
Yeah, well, that's a great question too. So I'd say a couple things. One is to measure it, right? So one, like with the proper assessments, they include questions around burnout to make sure that you're asking employees if they feel burnt out, when they feel burned out, how often do they feel burnt out, and measuring it. So like when you have an annual survey is one thing, but now there's a lot more technologies and tools that enable you to do pulse surveys so that you can understand on a weekly or a monthly basis, how burnt out are people and their workload. So measuring it's one thing. The other solution is to really empower your managers to have, what I call well-being conversations with their employees. Managers have to feel comfortable to truly check in with their teams, to ask them to ask their people, how are you, and how are you really doing? And asking the question, are you able to stay on top of your workload, or has it been too much? Tell me how you're doing. And are you finding time for the other areas of your life that are important to you? So just asking that question as a manager is really important, and making sure that the employee feels comfortable enough to answer it, because some employees are afraid to answer those questions if they think their manager doesn't really mean it, right? And then I think your other question was about like yourself.
Like the personal part of everyone.
Yeah, like, so how do you just do it for yourself, right? Is what you're asking?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that the simplest, fix is just having a really hard stop at the end of the day, like whether that's 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Hopefully it's not much later than that, but truly forcing yourself to have a hard stop and to close down your laptop, keep it in, one room, not taking it to other parts of your house or your room, but closing down and realizing that the best thing you can do for your work and the best way to be productive is to stop and go spend that time with your kids, or to stop and go get some exercise or take that break. And if you think in your head that the research is there that proves that those things are important, in that moment, you can kind of remember that and say to yourself, like, I need to just, completely stop. And, I always say that this is one of the benefits to having young kids. I don't know. Do you have kids? I forget if you told
No,
told
I
me.
don't.
Well, the one of the benefits from a burnout standpoint is that like I don't have the choice to, I can't really continue to work. Like once my nanny's going to leave and once I need to be like with my kids, like I have to shut down. And sometimes that's frustrating. Sometimes I want to, continue. And sometimes I do want to work a little bit more, but it does actually force me to get that balance in my life. So having that hard stop, and I'll just say one more thing on that, putting blocks on your calendar to literally prevent, whether it's colleagues or from adding meetings to your, your day, say during times maybe when you want to take a break or you want to end your day, blocking that off so that they're just not, your calendar is just not getting, automatically getting new additions of meetings. That's like one of the simplest ways to do it.
Many years ago, I did exactly what you're suggesting. So I was not eating at lunch at all. So I was like, this has to stop. So I
Mm-hmm.
blocked about 20 minutes, not much, of my calendar every single day. So it was not like overlapping with other meetings. And I was watching, I remember, a TEDx talk a day. So I watched about 300 TEDx's like in that year. So I was like, how am I feeling today? Okay, I'm going to watch a TEDx on this feeling, on the other. And it really works. So I really recommend
Mm-hmm.
you. It's a great advice. It's a great advice to block and do things for yourself during the day, 10, 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes
It's
a huge
amazing. Mm.
difference. Yeah, that's awesome that you did that. I mean, because it really does. And you have to see that because, like your time, if you don't consciously create your time and how you want to spend it, it will just get used in a default way. Like you'll just be at the mercy of what everybody else wants to do with your time, or just when if you think, well, oh, I see an opening for 12 o'clock. Sure, I could take a meeting then. But if you look at your calendar and at 12 it says, you need to take a break to eat, then
Mhm.
it prevents you in the moment from just filling your calendar up with an insane amount of meetings. So
So Daniel,
simple,
that's
but
amazing.
it's
And
helpful.
yes, exactly. And so I'm going to connect this with what you said during your presentation, that you are the CEO of your life. So you're the CEO of yourself, and that means that not
Mm-hmm.
only the corporations, but also the employees and everyone should start from themselves and start take caring of themselves and then start demanding from the
Mm-hmm.
corporations and the companies. And here I would like to ask you, what about the CEO now? Like the CEO of the company, should he,
Yeah.
she participate in the well-being program, in the well-being strategy? Should he, she look that they are having a life-work balance?
Yes. That's a very quick yes. I literally like I don't know if I would go so far as say I won't work with organizations that don't have their CEO involved, but let's just say, I look for organizations that really have that commitment coming from the CEO, because why wouldn't you? I mean, if I was running a major organization, as much as I know I'd be super strapped for time, I would also know that, hey, if I take care of myself, I'm only going to do my job better. I'm going to be set a better example for people. And that makes such a huge difference. I mean, when employees see that their CEO has this way about them, where he or she is saying, look, guys, we want to achieve excellence this year, but at the same time, I want you to take care of yourselves. I take care of my health, and I spend time with my family, and I prioritize that, and I take breaks. I mean, there isn't a better message that you could send to your employees than by saying something like that. And I've worked with execs that have gotten to this point in their life where they realize that they spend most of their life just grinding, just thinking that they have to be more and more successful, and they have sacrificed their family and the things that they want in their life because of that, and they regret it. They realize,
Mhm.
like, I want to do things that are more mindful. I don't want to be sacrificing my family, and you shouldn't have to wait till for like that long to make those changes. So absolutely, I mean, it makes a difference for the organization when the CEO is on board, and for the the
And for
CEO, because
this.
that CEO just goes to bed at night happier, more content, and feeling more like they're doing right by their organization. So it's definitely a win-win.
Perfect. So that's actually one of the few probably benefits of the COVID-19 that we've learned. It has fastened
Yeah.
up the necessity to have a life-work balance, to go at home and bed quiet, to be quiet, to wake up happier, and
Mm-hmm.
to pay bigger attention on who is around you, not only who are your friends, but who are your coworkers, who are your managers. What manager are you? towards the community and the society. So here I would like,
Yes.
the time flies, we can speak for hours. I would like to ask you for our last question, and
Mm-hmm.
except if you want to say something further, is that how life and work balance can be achieved, and how can we really know that we have a life work balance
Yeah,
life?
that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, work-life balance is definitely a huge part of well-being. I so I wrote this article about a year ago called "Shifting from Work Life to Life Work Balance," because with work-life balance, I feel like we're always just trying to figure out how to get life back into the equation. It's like it's really work, and then life is just trying to fit in there somehow. But so I think the to answer your question, the first part of that is just having this, changing your own perspective to say
Mhm.
it should be life work balance. Like, my life is so important, and there's people that are really struggling and don't feel like their life is important, and they're not mentally well, and they're struggling with a lot of things, and you just first need to remind yourself, like, my whole life is important. My kids are important. My health is important. The whatever, my leisure time is important. And so first saying to yourself that nothing is ever worth like sacrificing that. Um,
Mhm.
but and I'm not saying that work is so important as well, but making sure that you're not just, totally like leaning towards work all the time. So first, I think it's just that shift in perspective. Um, and then I think, a lot of us are kind of operating by, we're going through life. I call it like, that we are get that we get stuck in the automaticness of life, meaning that life, sometimes if we don't take the time to consciously create what we want in life and to think about what we want, whether it's that day, or that year, or like in 20 years, if we don't really take the time to consciously think about how do I want my day to go, how do I want this year to go, how does this job fit into my overall life and my goals, if we don't take the time to consciously think about those things, we get stuck in this like automaticness of life, meaning that we end up in a job for years that we don't really like, and then we're annoyed that we didn't come out of it faster. We're not eating well, and then as a result, like, we have health problems like later on, and it just starts to happen. So I think a big part of that, really having true work-life balance, is, whether it's meditation or something else that just helps you take a second to really consciously think about what you want in your life, is a huge part of it. And then when you do that, it helps you block out your day in the way that you want to see it, block out. It helps you have a different context for your work, because instead of just showing up for a job, you might now think, well, this job ties to my goal of reaching this kind of position, like this promotion that I'm looking to get like next year and stuff. So anyway, this is a long-winded answer to your question, but point just
No,
being that
it was nice.
it requires the conscious, really conscious intention, I guess you could say. Does that actually answer your question?
It did, actually
Okay.
did. And it made me
Okay.
think, and I'm sure it made our members think as well, and to reevaluate their work-life balance strategy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Danielle, that was very insightful, very helpful. I hope you can share with us all the tests and metrics, and also the tests that you have on your website. I actually took it. We're doing
Oh,
pretty
good.
good, so I'm happy. But yeah, it was very insightful, and thank you very much once again for being here with us. We hope to see you also in Greece in person soon. Now
Yes,
that
me
the
too. I have never been to
coronavirus.
Greece, and I would would love to get there at some point. So, but
Thank,
thank you so much
thank you once again.
for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. Have a very pleasant evening.
Thank you. You too.